Welcome to the SprocketPod, your podcast for helpful HubSpot content. I'm Cameron Collins, and alongside my co-host Mark Lerner, we sit down each week with experts on the HubSpot CRM to break down cool builds and unique apps that will make your instance better. Whether you're a new admin or you're a business owner looking to get the most out of HubSpot, our conversations are going to provide you with unique insights that you can apply. Don't forget, we host the SprocketPod live on LinkedIn every week, and you can catch all of our episodes on YouTube and Spotify. Let's dive into today's episode and get you working smarter with HubSpot.
Hello and welcome indeed to the SprocketPod. Thank you for tuning in to another episode. I'm Cameron Collins, Revenue Operations Strategist and host of the SprocketPod. Today we have our guest, Timmy with Rooster. Timmy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Cameron. It's a pleasure. We're gonna do a little switcheroo here because usually Cameron is the interviewer, but today I'm gonna take it upon myself to interview Cameron because, as you all know, Cameron is a RevOps legend within the scene, and we'd love to know more about what reportings, what builds, and all of that. That he really. What's the words? What is the words? Suggest.
Well, I think the goal today is really to break down reports that are fundamental for HubSpot instances. And I know, Timmy, you and I have had some disagreement before the show started around what some of those fundamental reports are. So I'm really eager to break down some of the core reports that I tend to put into an instance and why I tend to do those. And I know you have a few that you tend to lean into that you think are most important. For those who aren't familiar with you and maybe haven't seen your chicken suit, if you're listening to just the audio here, make sure you follow Timmy Van Roy on LinkedIn. He's Mr. Chicken Suit Man. Tell everyone a little bit about yourself just coming into the HubSpot ecosystem, and then we'll jump into reporting after that.
I really rolled into HubSpot accidentally. Never was on my radar. I used to be a HubSpot customer and then turned into a HubSpot agency. I'm very new and green in HubSpot, but I'm a business veteran. I've been being entrepreneurial since I was 12, walking out dogs for a couple of euros. Then by the time I was 24, I already managed and coached a team of 42 sales professionals, done north of 3 million in revenue for energy contractors, solar panels, and a lot more. And then I opened my first own business, fully legal. So not as a fake self-employed, but as an actual entrepreneur. It was quality management systems, ISO norms, and all of that. It was so boring. So it didn't last long. I then had a beer company, beer subscriptions, where we grew to 1,000 customers within 1 year and a half. That was quite cool. We then went bankrupt because apparently if you have a lot of customers, operations needs to be able to follow. Who would have guessed? And then now Rooster, where I help startups, data and AI consultancies, and only data and AI consultancies with getting their strangers into paid customers. So that's what I do with Rooster, which is going quite well. We've had last month more inbound leads than in the past 2 years of Bfluence before we rebranded, or I rebranded to Rooster. So that's me in a nutshell.
That's right. Rebranded from Bfluence to Rooster here as we have today. And you mentioned something important, which is you had your first official business. I think that's what we determine as by when we start paying taxes, right? And when we declare it on our taxes, it's an official business, right?
It's actually not true because my first business opened when I was 19. That was a self-defense school. Now that I think of it, Krav Maga, so Israel in close combat. I got that to 5 figures within per month after a couple of months, but then went bankrupt because I was so young to spend my money. Then I went into door-to-door selling, and there I was a contractor. So I had my VAT number, and I was just charging them. And then when I say as a true entrepreneur, I mean really the Krav Maga school was within a federation, so there was support there. Then there was the door-to-door, which was in a huge, international company, so there was support. So I meant without support, if that makes more sense.
It does. And going bankrupt, of course, you've seen the highs and the lows of business. One of the core tenets of revenue operations, I believe, is based on how it's defined, which I follow the definition that RevOps is the science of sustainable revenue growth. And so what that means is that, companies can grow, but they can't scale without sustainability. And if you look at companies, major startups, Uber, Airbnb, I mean, really all of them, it's not uncommon that you have a company that comes in and they grow quickly with VC-backed money, but it's not until they go public that then they start to seek profitability, or as they move toward going public that they seek profitability. And I think that one of the goals and the beautiful aspects about what we do in the HubSpot ecosystem is we have the opportunity to encourage companies to get their reporting right so they can become profitable or raise profitability much earlier in the process, as opposed to the unicorn startup world that a lot of big companies enter.
Yeah, I also feel like that system is a little bit broken with VCs and growth at all costs kind of thing. And I 100% agree with what you're saying, is that reporting and insight, it's like when you know what you weigh, you automatically lose weight because you just know your numbers. The same with like cars. If you know your fuel consumption, you automatically start using less because you know your numbers. And I feel like knowing your numbers and KPI is such a big part of business and sustainable business, as you said.
Now, when it comes to digging into a HubSpot instance, and we're going to get into some of the more nuanced reports here shortly, but where do you begin in terms of assessing where you should start with reporting? I know that your business model, it follows a very plug and play type of process where you can apply a system to any company and every company that you work with, ideally. So where do you begin with plugging that system in?
Yeah. Good question. So we only work with data and AI consultancies with high touch sales motions, so 50K plus deals. And basically they've got the same three issues. They don't know who to sell to, or they're selling too broad, first of all. Second of all, they're always doing complete custom work and rebuilding actually their company, which is not scalable. And then the third one is that they don't really have OKRs or set goals when it comes to that. So basically the first thing that we do is we audit their current state, where we look at current documentation, and not specifically like what I always talk about macro and micro. So macro processes and micro filling in. So for instance, an NDA can be a macro thing, and then the exact things that are inside of the NDA are the micro stuff. So we look from a macro perspective, like what do they have, what don't they have? And then now, since our last customer, because we just upgraded, or I just upgraded there, we usually did an analysis of 2 weeks. And then we started out with the HubSpot and setting everything in. Now, because of our last customer who was faster than we could blink, they already bought their HubSpot portal, which was cool. And now we're like, hey, we translate the data first that they have, enrich that, put that into the HubSpot. And then we actually start out from a very clean HubSpot instance, because we did it ourselves. We migrated everything, which gives a lot less headache. So our onboarding is pretty soon, because basically we're usually the ones who introduce HubSpot versus hey, here's a fully, HubSpot portal that's been used for 2 or 3 years with bad data governance, with bad rules, and just a mess of CRM system with double properties and life cycle added and yeah, you need to completely get the jungle and cut it out. And so I think that's the biggest difference between what you guys do and what we do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, and I think that a lot of companies, a lot of portals that I've been in, but just speaking for many admin in general, there's what I would call different data maturity levels. And so this is something that we've talked about on the show here on the SprocketPod before, but you can go from an instance that has 0 data in it. And the first step really then becomes, let's identify everything we can about this business and bring the core data in HubSpot. But it works its way through the data maturity levels, where levels 1 and 2 then become looking at essentially, do we have the winning by design bow tie, which I know you're familiar with, Timmy, and for our listeners who might not be familiar, winning by design by Jocko van der Kuij, he created it. It's mapping out your business model, right? But the question becomes, how do you get those data points into HubSpot, and can you track them? For me. And so a lot of times with businesses, whether they have data in HubSpot or not, that's really the first questions that I'm trying to answer is, how do I get to where I can track leads to MQLs, to SQLs, to deals, to revenue? And if I can't do that, then that becomes the North Star for my starting point. So when you're starting, I know we talked a little bit about ICP and such, but where is your North Star? Like, what are the central questions or data points that you're trying to answer when you dive into a business?
Yeah. So basically, when you talk about like leads, MQL, SQL, we already have that figured out. So we basically use our methodology and push that into the system because we don't really do custom work. That's the nice thing about working with immature companies is that they're like an open canvas. So we get to do the rough sketches and then paint together with the company on a micro level, but the macro level, everything is fixed out. So the things that I'm looking at for specifically, again, data and AI consultancies is, do they have a very clear who are we targeting? So do they have a niche that they're targeting? And second of all, do they have a very clear what problems do we solve for these? So you spoke about Uber and Airbnb, which are beautiful companies. They both came out of Y Combinator, and Y Combinator's got beautiful data where they suggest that having those two axes on niching down what you do and for who you do it, startups tend to grow up to 93% faster. So for me, that's a big thing. Like, do we have these two levers?
And I think that's really important, then making sure that you, for any admin, have a North Star. And so whether you're following the levers that Timmy just mentioned, whether you're following the data points of the bow tie model, and that becomes your North Star, making sure that I think just in general as HubSpot admin and as RevOps professionals, when we're going into HubSpot portals, though, you have some type of central question that you're looking to answer. And I'm curious, Timmy, because I know that you have a very specific ICP that you work with. Do you think that your approach would work universally, or does this require that a company is always working with one type of client?
That's a very interesting question. So basically, oh man, I can talk hours about this. So I've got autism, which means that I'm very into patterns. And one of the things that I always flabbergasted me was the fact that so many businesses fail. Like, up to 90% of new businesses fail within 5 years, which makes no sense because we're all using existing business models. Like, it's not like Facebook that was a real new business model that had to learn to monetize, like Reddit that had to learn to monetize, like most businesses today are copies of other businesses. So if we're copies of other businesses, then it makes no sense that we're constantly reinventing the wheel, and we're constantly trying to understand how we heat water, because it's been done before. So basically now what I'm doing is I believe that every company has got the same operating principles, has got the same, you've got growth, you've got operations or product or services, and then you've got support. And fundamentally, all companies are like that. So how can I take away as many variables as possible to make sure that the systems that I implement work on companies? So for instance, I work with data and AI consultancies, and I know these data and AI consultancies. So this makes it so that I don't need to do a new competitor matrix. I've got one competitor matrix, and these are viable for all of my clients. So I don't need to redo that. It makes it hyper scalable. If I tomorrow want to put the same systems to, let's say, cybersecurity, I can, because they've got the same, variables. They're technical products. They need to sell to non-technical buyers. They've got high ACVs, they've got project scopes. So I'm trying to make sure that I'm implementing systems with the least amount of variables that can change the outcome. Because in the end, we buy as businesses or as buyers, we don't want to buy systems, we want to buy outcomes. And a good system ensures an outcome. And the less amount of variables that I need to take in account, the more plausible it will be that certain set of outcomes can be guaranteed, if that makes sense.
Well, it sounds like really the takeaway there is that when you create a system you're not like an agency with many employees, but as a company, right? When you create a system that applies to your clients, there's like that spectrum of closeness. Is it a similar go-to-market motion? Is it a similar ACV? Is the niche close in vein to my current set of clients? And if it's within that closeness on the spectrum, then you can translate the system. But if you were to take exactly what you're doing today and apply it to a nonprofit that helps animals, it probably isn't going to apply as a system, because that is a very different company or organizational type with a very different go-to-market motion and ACV.
From a macro perspective, nothing would change. From a micro perspective, things would change. But then, like, for instance, because like one of the things that we do is surround bound, which is from Matt, and probably a lot of listeners here know Matt, who originally founded Rev Partners and is now head of Supert. Great software, by the way, for people out there who are not on Supert yet. Go get Supert. It's really enabled me as a solopreneur to get crazy margins. Just saying. So the moment, like, the only thing that needs to be plausible is like, do I have high enough ACV? Because surround bound is a very high touch motion. And do I have an high enough ACV? That's it. I think it's one of the nicest motions, because like a lot of people try cold email tactics, try ad tactics, try this tactics, try that tactics. And for me, it doesn't really matter what tactics you use. Like, leads are not a result of tactics. Leads are a result of understanding who you're selling to, understanding the problems, and understanding where they want to go and need to go, and how to help them get there. If you understand that, then you will get leads, no matter what tactics you use.
And how do you explain surround bound for those who maybe haven't heard the term before?
Good question. So surround bound is a LinkedIn first and LinkedIn only play. So you basically surround your targets with continuous impactful content. So content that helps them, by commenting on their stuff, by actively, really being very active on LinkedIn, so that people are like, oh, the chicken man, I know the chicken man. I used to do that in together with cold calling, which was crazy, because I had 66% connected to meeting booked. 66%, like, let that number, see, 66% meeting booked, because everyone was like, oh, you're the chicken man from LinkedIn. Yeah, okay, let's talk. And now with surround bound, I've got 42% meeting booked with pure surround bounds. 42%. So not reply rate, meeting booked. Let that again seep in. And it's purely on how can I provide value? How can I serve my target audience by what I said before, understanding their needs, helping them out, and just being like an expert that the moment that someone is like, hey, I need to grow my company, who do I need to be with? I need to be with the chicken man from Rooster Booster.
And so reporting, of course, one of the goals of reporting is it tracks attribution. Surround bound, there's a little bit of a dark funnel element to it. I know that Matt Bolian has often been a big advocate that it doesn't matter about what's being tracked. All that matters is that it's working. But of course, when you get to the scale of companies, if you have a multi-million-dollar enterprise company, you can't just tell them, well, go have your reps do surround bound and hopefully we see revenue go up. So I think it's a good segue into like the fundamentals of reporting, because if you don't have the fundamentals, you can do surround bound all you want. You can do really fancy, exciting things, but if you can't measure it, is it really happening? Is it really working? And the answer is no. So, Timmy, what are some of the fundamental reports that you throw into every single instance? Give me one of the ones that you will always put into any instance, and we'll bounce back and forth with which ones are most important to you and I, and whether we agree or disagree that it ought to go into every single instance.
All right. So since we're talking about surround bounds, I have a surround bound dashboard that goes everywhere. Basically, it's one, what's the prospecting funnel? So we've got open, in progress, connected. Oh, this needs to be changed. This is diagnosed, and then qualified. So basically, I want to see like, okay, how is my top of funnel looking? Everything before my deals. So I do not want to have any unqualified things. The moment I create a deal, they need to be aware of my pricing. They need to be aware of, we need to be aware of their situation and their challenges, their scenario and their challenges. Then the amount of context that we import. Surround bound only works if you have context. So basically, I want to see minimum 10 contexts that we import. And then we also have got a connection acceptance percentage. So here, It varies between 7 to up to 50%. Founders tend to get better connection acceptance requests. So then you can optimize your LinkedIn profile, and your LinkedIn profile really needs to speak to your target audience, again, with their problems, understanding who they are, what they need, and then leads will come. And then the connection acceptance percentage is a very nice benchmark to see how good your profile is optimized or not. How do we track this? The moment, and I will just walk you through the flow. Oh my God, since we're here. For the people listening, you are missing out because you should not listen to stuff. You should come and watch, because then you can see no fluff workflows. Basically, I've got my network, people that I send connection requests to. So I try to send at least 5 to 10. The moment that someone accepts my connection request through Serve, I put them on, where is the Serve dashboard? There it is. I put them from new to open, and then the moment I put them on open, a lead gets created. And then because of that lead, the value of connection requests goes from false to true. And then that's how I track the connection acceptance requests. Then, of course, it's activities. I'm a big believer that if you boil down your numbers until activities, you don't need to guess. You just need to make sure that you hit your activities. So that's why I've got an activities dashboard and then a specific DM dashboard as well, to make sure that there's accountability and that DMs are sent. And that's what we have so far for the surround bounds. What's your thoughts on that, Cameron?
So here's a question. First off, do you get companies that you tell them, listen, you've got to be on LinkedIn, surround bound is the way, and they just say, no, we're not going to have our people creating content, or at least we can't commit to creating content at that volume that you're asking?
Very good question. Yes, friction, lots of friction. So that's one of the things, because we talked about this offline. I used to go, I used my stats, my LinkedIn stats to benchmark stuff. And like, I've been doing content now for 7 months, nearly every day. I had a lot of shitty content. And I think one of the things of a good system is that people believe in the system, and there's trust in the process. Trust the process, results will follow. So that's why I scope down from, hey, you need to go 7 times a week. Like, okay, boil that down, and you just need to post 3 times a week. And you can post about whatever. So now I'm really trying to create content about whatever, not too polished, not very scripted and everything, which is also very nice. And I had great results with that. But if I can't push it to user adoption, then the system is worthless. So yes, I get pushback. And now I am working very hard to make sure that I get the least amount of pushback possible. In the end, look, it's very easy. Where do you want to get? What are your goals? And if you don't know your goals, if you don't know your North Star, then you're also like wasting my time. So that's why we've got very nice discoveries to make sure that you are ambitious, that you want to go somewhere, and that your work ethic is level, because else you don't need to bullshit yourself. You don't want anything but dream yourself rich, which is not going to happen.
You heard it here, folks. Working with Timmy is not for the weak. You've got to have the grit to follow his advice, and thou shalt be rewarded. All right, I want to dive into a couple of the items under my reporting recommendation here. So I have a whole dashboard, and a lot of these are interrelated, but we're going to start with just these top 3 sections here. And the first one is going to be volume of contacts created over time. Now, it's not showing the right tab. 1 second.
We've got technical issues. We'll be right back after this commercial. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know what to do and you've got flow problems, that's A-okay, because then Rooster Booster comes in and solves all of your issues. Rooster Booster, if you didn't already, contact us right now.
That was a brief radio intermission. Welcome back to the SprocketPod. Sign up for Rooster Booster if you haven't already. Check it out. All right, so my 3 key reporting elements that I want to start with are going to be the ones on the top right here, kind of forming this backwards upside down L. So first off, we have contacts created over time. Super, super simple report. But to me, this is a huge way to know if the basics are working. So Timmy, to the point that you mentioned where you teach your people to do surround bound, they go to LinkedIn, they add the connection request, and they start building that portfolio of people in their pipeline. This is a great way for you on the admin side, on the RevOps side, to flip around and say, okay, are they being consistent? So if you go a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and you're seeing 20 contacts, and then you see 0, something happened, or, you see a big spike. Well, what did they do differently? And so now you can start drilling in and ask questions by understanding, why is the flow of contacts coming in at the rate that it is? The next two go hand in hand. This is just a visualization specifically of MQLs, but down here we also have the full conversion of the lifecycle stages. Starting with MQLs though, most companies don't have MQL or SQL lifecycle stages defined. Now HubSpot has default lifecycle stage settings, and I mean, they do okay for companies that are very early and are, like, again, literally integrating data with HubSpot. And you're talking first 30, 60 days maybe. But a company should have lifecycle stages defined. And most importantly, with customer lifecycle stages, you need to use in HubSpot, in my opinion, inclusion lists to define them. So is a marketing lead somebody who fills out a form? Is it somebody who comes in through surround bound, or is that an SQL, right? So if we were following your process, Timmy, I would use this report to define, are these surround bound leads sales qualified leads? Okay, fine. Well, do I also have a landing page on my website where if somebody fills out a form, that's an MQL? And again, because most companies don't have these stages defined, this gives me a really good idea of A, do they have anything in place? Or B, what is the level of consistency? So just like with contacts, if we see here that there's nothing and then all of a sudden a spike, well, what changed? Why was that flagged in that month? And now we can start asking those questions and drilling in. And the same exact thing applies for lifecycle stage conversion funnel metrics. Now, a lot of people have opinions on customer lifecycle stages. Should you allow stages to be skipped because that more accurately reflects the buyer's journey? Or should you enforce contacts to go through stages sequentially? My answer is it depends on what's most important to you. I think either option is acceptable depending on one of two things. Do you care more about the conversion metrics and seeing the leakage? So you want to know where is the greatest drop off? Is it between MQL and SQL, or SQL and opportunity? Or do you care more about the time between stages? Now, in my opinion, the actual conversion metrics are more important because I can get a lot of information by understanding why there's a drop off between MQL and SQL. And I think that's more valuable than simply the accuracy gained by allowing stages to be skipped and having those more accurate time and stage conversions. So those three are going to be my starting reports. But Timmy, I'm going to open it to you for feedback.
I feel like when talking about the life cycle stages, it's really very dependent on like business models. Like if you have a no-touch business model versus low-touch, mid-touch, etc. Because for me personally, I find marketing qualified lead kind of redundant if there's no marketing team, if that makes sense. So basically, it's like where in the journey is the prospect to make sure that I do the right steps and I do the right things. That being said,
I would say that can be true, but what, like, for example, let's say that you're working with a company in your niche and there's 8 people on the team. It's the executives and the sales reps. So there's no one dedicated to marketing. Well, if a contact fills out a form on the website, a contact us form, or if they find the company through AI and just call the company directly, I mean, I guess you could flag them as a lead, but in my mind, those could be MQLs.
Yeah, so that's where I just wanted to go. The moment you basically have like any type of forms or data capturing tools on the website, you could like see that as a 24/7 marketing team. But I also feel like marketing qualified lead is the only stage that can be skipped in my vertical. In the essence of if a sales, like if I go and I book a meeting with someone, then they go from leads to sales qualified leads after that meeting. So I feel like marketing qualified lead is the only
potentially optional
thing.
I would agree with that. I will say that a lot of what probably both of us are talking about becomes very vertical specific to a degree.
Yeah.
So for example, I've worked with many nonprofit organizations, and they oftentimes have essentially lead because they want a catch-all lifecycle stage, or sometimes we rename it to top of funnel. Then they may have marketing qualified leads specifically for somebody who like visits the website and just submits a form expressing interest in the company, the organization. And then they have donor, and it jumps like right from MQL to donor. SQL gets skipped because there's no sales motion. So
exactly. But exactly the same with e-commerce, for instance. E-commerce, I can see a lead, I can see a marketing qualified lead, but then I can see a customer. I don't see a sales qualified lead or opportunity in an e-commerce store, because like these are very, very like, 50 euro kind of deals. Like you don't need to get that granular, because your sales cycle is like, days or minutes even, instead of weeks or months. So I feel like maybe also that's maybe, I didn't think about that, but with that, like the longer your sales cycles are, the more granular you need to get in your life cycle stages, because it's actually a life cycle.
Right. And that's actually a really interesting point, where the go-to-market motion drives a lot of this. If you are e-commerce, it's much potentially smaller in scope. If you have a very expansive and complex go-to-market motion, I mean, all of this is before we even talk about the lead object. Some of you might be rolling your eyes right now, but if you have a complex sales motion, then there is a place for lead records. And if you don't have a complex motion, then that might not be the case. So a lot of this does become dependent. But again, for me, the purpose of these reports is so we can start asking the right questions. It's not necessarily so I can jump in and tell a company everything about their business that they want to know. Really, it's uncovering a lot of things that they may not even realize are broken oftentimes. So those are going to be a couple of my key reports. I know, Timmy, you have a whole dashboard and a whole process. So I open it up to you if there's anything else you want to share with the systems that you import into companies.
I've got a couple other dashboards. Let's see. So I've got my ICP analysis. Basically, my ICP analysis is I like to do things data driven. So one of the things what I notice with companies is when they say like, yeah, ICP, my ICP is fitness industry, for instance. I'm like, okay, but fitness industry, how are you going to build lists? So basically the whole point of having an ICP is so you can build lists. That's the reason why you have an ICP. Then you've got your DMU, your decision-making units, that translates into buyer persona profiles. And with these buyer personas, you can create your content strategy. You can create like, what are these people thinking? What are they feeling? What are their emotions? What are their needs, etc. So for an ICP dashboards, I've got this, and I'll quickly share it. I basically translated brackets of, like, for instance, employee range, revenue per headquarters location, and revenue per industry. And this is all based on Sales Navigator search lists. So for company headcounts, I'm using the same brackets as Sales Navigator. For headquarter locations, I'm again using the same brackets. And here for industry, because LinkedIn follows NAICS, NAICS of Microsoft, while HubSpot industries are a little bit different. So the industry property of HubSpot doesn't match the LinkedIn properties. So I created a separate property for specific, LinkedIn, so I can mix and match the companies and like make a complete data-driven, like, who is our ICP? For me personally, the reason why, because a lot of people are like, yeah, but I need tons of customers. No, not true. The reason why I pick data and AI is twofold. One, I'm a smart person, so I like to talk to smart people. And data and AI people generally are pretty smart. So I like these people. Second of all, I think I had 10 customers or something, or 11. And I looked, and 2 of them just happened to be data and AI consultancies. So statistically, 20% of my clients, or 27% of my clients, 18% of my clients were data and AI consultancies with 5 to 20 people. Hence, I translated it to my hyper-specific niche, data and AI consultancies with 5 to 20 people. So that's the ICP dashboard. Then I've got another dashboard which is business performance to see like, hey, do I have a healthy business or not? You want to, you want to have like new versus existing business. You want to have 70 to 80% existing business, 20 to 30% new business. If it's wrong here, it shows two possible problems. Either you've got a delivery problem, so new business does not become existing business, so people do not get upsold, which is a problem because it's a lot more sustainable to get more money out of someone's pockets than to get more money out of multiple people. Second thing is that you can have a sales issue if you do not have consistent new business coming in. So we track that on a general, like, all time. And then we track that also per year. And then lastly, we also track the turnover generation of companies to see like if there's no big whale that can potentially harm the business if they fall out. I have a nice story about a business that was 80% came from one customer, and I warned them that this was dangerous. 2 years later, I heard that the customer left them and that they had to, because this was a huge company. This was like a company with like, I think 400 or 500 employees, and they had to like let go of a lot of people because of that. So, and then last but not least is forecasting. And this is specifically for consultancy agencies. One of the biggest things for consultancy is people versus demand. So generation demand versus supplying demand. And with the forecasting, if you have accurate forecasting, because that's a big thing, of course, accurate forecasting, then you can see a little bit how your headcount necessities will be for specific, again, consultancy vertical, if that makes sense.
No, it does. I think all of those are really very necessary reports. There isn't anything in there that I would argue shouldn't be in an instance really as early as possible. And when it comes to a couple of the ones that even I look at, I think we're answering very similar questions. So one of the ones that I jump in with is we're taking the volume of contacts created by source. And the reason that this one becomes so important is because, as many of us know, offline sources in HubSpot oftentimes comprises of a very high volume of traffic, if not most of it. And when you drill down into the original source of offline sources, it oftentimes becomes very hard to answer, like, where are these contacts actually coming from? So this helps me understand, hey, if I was looking at this portal, 97% of the contacts in August were an offline source, and we really don't have a way to drill into what that offline source is. So we need to start answering that question and setting up attribution bucketing pretty early in the process to make sure we can answer that. Now, to your point, Timmy, if most of your clients are surround bound coming from LinkedIn, that may not be a very pressing question to answer. But the moment you start getting 2, 3, 4 sources, and you start getting offline sources, and you start getting things that are jumbled up, you really want to start to get that attribution, because that's how you go from closing a handful of deals to scale as you double down on what's working and cut back on what isn't. Another one that I tend to touch on very early in the process is lead status. And this one is interesting because I think a lot of sales teams oftentimes just neglect lead status. It's not uncommon that reps use notes to track contacts that they want to keep up with, or they use some other proxy property instead of lead status. But I think that's a big mistake. I also think that because lead status is, at least for some of the steps, fairly easy to automate, it's a very good win for those of us on the admin side coming into a portal to say, if you have a contact that has an email that's been responded to, let's move them into connected, right? Or when you have activity, we can move it to attempted contact automatically. And so I think that lead status is both a low-hanging fruit, and oftentimes it's just a neglected opportunity where most of the time you have contacts with an empty status or they're stuck in new.
I feel like here, and you touched upon it already, like the lead pipelines when it comes to lead status are just heaven, because your lead status basically is like, where are they in the lead pipeline?
Right.
Except for like, recycle or nurture and even those. So I feel like what I dare always suggest, let me see if I can show it up. I don't know if it's in the you know what? I'm going to go to my live portal. Give me a sec.
Got a bonus report incoming.
Not a report, but like a way to make sure that the data of the report is coherent. So what I do here is I've got all of the, as well, the lead statuses, but I've got them paired with specific, with the lead pipeline. So depending on where they are in the lead pipeline, the lead status will be put automatically, which is just heaven. And then also, like, for instance, disqualified, depending on what kind of disqualification, we either need to unqualify them or we need to recycle them. Here is a big difference between recycling and qualified. And qualified is like, we do not want to waste any more time. Maybe, you know, pick it up in a year when we've evolved, depending on why they were in qualified. Maybe it's because we were not mature enough, then we can pick it up in a year. Recycle is like, okay, we need to get back in like 3 months and see what's up and how it's going. So I feel like that's also a very big part of reporting is, of course, data governance, and a lot of workflows should work back to back with reporting.
I'm very aligned with that. And yeah, it's to the point of automating lead status. I don't think that's a revolutionary thing for many admin who are listening, but it is something that oftentimes gets neglected. But again, it's an early win. It's an easy win for a lot of admin who are coming into an account and want to make a high value impact. And for anyone who's an end user who's listening, going in and addressing lead status and making sure it's both adopted and automated, that is a huge thing for your company in terms of data and then pipeline management. One of the last reports that I really want to touch on is going to be breaking down deals by product type. And this is so important because it lets you know what you're selling and what you're not. And it's not uncommon that companies don't have their deals broken down by product. Now, if you're not using deal line items, then this becomes a little bit more tricky. I have seen quite often in similar instances here where it's not uncommon to just use a property that indicates what is being sold on the deal. But I do think that using deal line items early in the process is so important because you're probably going to want or need to adopt them at some point down the road. And so hearing me loud and clear, I'm a huge advocate for adopting deal line items, product line items on the deal object. I know it can be frustrating because they don't associate to other objects, and there's a whole thought process and philosophy around that. But again, being able to track monthly recurring revenue, TCV, product, all of that at the deal level is huge. But it starts with breaking down whether or not deals are even tracking their product type. So that is a very important report to me when I'm jumping into a company. Is this being tracked? If it is, what does it look like? Is there a singular product that outweighs all the others? Is that a recurring product or a one-time usage product? And then taking that conversation from there.
I think this one, and I don't have a finished one yet, but I feel like, you know, whether you're using Jira or services, I'm a big fan of services now in HubSpot, so you don't need to, is to actually backtrack your actual cost and do after cost calculation. So that way you can also see on the product level, like, okay, how profitable are we? Because in the end, if you're more profitable, you can get better people, you can get so much more with profitability. And I feel like that's also one of the, as a business person, I feel like, how can I get the most amount of money with the most amount of profit as fast as possible? Because with that profit, with that money, you can do so much more. So I think it's a very nice business report, the product one. Love it. I'm gonna steal that one.
And you've built businesses from ground up. You've entered the HubSpot ecosystem. You've made a name for yourself. What advice do you have for either admin who are earlier in their career or companies who are early in their adoption process in getting up and running with HubSpot?
End state. What is our end state? Where do we want to go? Like, usually I see most projects fail, and this is with my clients. This is we just, you know, go HubSpotters, like, what end state do we want? That's number one. Second of all, user adoption. How am I going to get, like, you know, make sure that my users actually use the system in the process? Because if no one uses it, then it's a shitty system. And also, And this is the big part. If your users are not adopting your process, whose fault is it? And that is where the differentiator is between myself, who can charge, I think now I'm at 40K something for 4 weeks of work as a solopreneur, 97% profit. So it's my fault if users do not operate my system. That's my fault, no one else's. So if it's my fault, what is in my control? What is in my, power to get people to actually use the system? So I can do two things. I can be a little whiny, diny, no one is using my processes. No one is respecting the admin. Or I can be like, okay, no one is using the systems. What can I do to get them to use the systems and actually, get my value and my market value up? Because if you're a victim, you will be paid like a victim. If you're a winner and you think like a winner, you will be paid like a winner. That for me is one of the best tips, mindset, whether you're an employee or whether you're an entrepreneur, whatever, mindset is your number one asset.
Yeah, I think accountability goes a long way as the admin. I mean, the amount of power or influence or whatever you want to call it that the CRM admin has on the direction of the business is immense. And being able to recognize that means oftentimes asking hard questions, but ensuring that, for example, when you're working with executives and they want something created, you're taking user adoption into account. Because if you just say yes and you build something just because you were told to or asked to, and if you don't consider user adoption, whose fault is it? It's not the executive's fault who said to build something. It's your fault for not speaking up. In my opinion, as an admin, it's our duty to speak up, to push back, to ask questions, and to make sure that we're driving that user adoption when we're building stuff.
Yeah. And to add on that, I think like one of the best things there is like to make agreements, because it's so easy to chase agreements in the sense of like, hey, look, like, because sometimes executives like myself, we can be quite stubborn, like we're founders and we're C-suits or whatever for reasons, because we've got very strong opinions. And as an admin, like what you can do if they keep pushing and they don't listen to your advice, like, hey, look, I'm willing to do that, but what if it doesn't work? What if that, like, where's going to be the accountability? Because I'm telling you that this will not work. And I want to prove to you by doing what you're asking me to the best of my capabilities. I really want to do it the best possible just to prove you wrong. But what's going to happen when it's wrong? Like, is it going to be your fault or my fault? And make agreements and make very, very, clarity. We love clarity.
Clarity is so important. And again, driving adoption, user alignment. And Timmy, I'm sure we'll have you back for a whole episode just on alignment and user adoption. But I just want to really wrap with this. When it comes to being an admin, I think that, in my opinion, there's a handful of traits and elements that make a really good admin. Communication is super important. For anyone who's done the Super Admin Bootcamp, they've talked about having a growth mindset. I think that's important too. What is one trait that maybe is less obvious, or that you think some admin might struggle with more than others, that admin should adopt and really step into boldly?
Ownership. I think ownership, like really owning, like if the day, like for instance, like I sometimes, like, my clients' portals are my portals. They are my fucking portals. They're not my clients' portals. They're my portals. And they are they show my professional pride as a HubSpot super admin. They're my professional pride. So I want them to be clean. I want them to be in order. And this is the one of the best lessons I had from a business mentor. I went to, with the door-to-door company. I arrived at the building and someone out there was cleaning, and I was like, hey, I need to be here. Where do I need to be? And it was like, yeah, go up the top floor, and then I was there again. So I went to the top floor, bomb, and then I've got my first interview. And I was waiting, and they were like, yeah, the boss is gonna come. And I was waiting, and then the boss came, and it was the guy who was sweeping the floor outside. And I was like, what? You're the boss? Why the hell would you sweep the floor outside? And it was like, because I'm the boss, because no one cares as much as I do about how clean it is here. I need the best experience. So I think ownership, treat every portal as if it is your portal. And that is going to, again, make your market value rise massively.
I agree with that so wholeheartedly. And I think it goes along with the themes that we've talked about with accountability and owning communications and just making sure that, to me, it plays into the product, not project mindset. You're always iterating your CRM. This isn't a let's just launch one or two things. Let's just set up an integration and we're done. It is ongoing as you continue to develop more data, better data, and grow your business.
I have a second one.
Last word.
I have a second one. And I don't know what your take is on this, but salesmanship. In the sense of like, why is it important for salespeople? They hate administrative work. So how can we as super admin, and I am also a sales guy, I've got many hats, but like, how can we translate there? Because we want clean data, we want to have a proper CRM, but how do we translate that, communicate that to that salesperson who's never putting in the deal amount? They're always, doing the phone number without plus 32 or
Right.
And I feel like salesmanship, you said communication, but I would maybe even zoom that out in like selling why proper usage of the CRM is going to benefit not only the salesman, and not only you, but like, the company in general, if that makes sense.
I think that's a good call out, and it's a good distinction. In sales, we oftentimes use the acronym with them, what's in it for me, and being able to articulate that to end users, to executives, to stakeholders, and helping them understand, I have an objective, I need to make it done, here's what's in it for you. Or an executive gives you an assignment and you have to communicate that to the end user. Here's what's changing, here's why, here's how it's important. You supered. But being able to articulate that what's in it for me, I think is so important. And Timmy, you have given so much valuable advice to everybody who's listening. For those who aren't already connected with you on LinkedIn, make sure that you follow Timmy on LinkedIn, Timmy Van Roy, founder of Rooster Booster. Timmy, thank you for joining. And for those of you who enjoyed this episode and want to get more of Timmy and more of myself, check out our new video series, the Admin Arena. That's right. We started a game show built into HubSpot. Timmy is one of our contestants, and it was a really good time creating games and mini challenges built inside of HubSpot. So if you haven't seen that already, go check out the Admin Arena on this YouTube channel. And thank you for checking out the SprocketPod. Sprocket on.
Thank you for tuning into the SprocketPod podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode with your co-hosts, Cameron Collins and Mark Lerner. Be sure to catch us live every week on LinkedIn, and don't forget to subscribe to our episodes on YouTube and Spotify. If you found this episode valuable, please leave a review and share it with others looking to get more from HubSpot. Until next time, keep driving success with your CRM, and as always, Sprocket on.